Hello, Sylwia. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, Łukasz. Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hi. Wonderful to
Can
have you
you
with
can
us.
you hear me?
Sylwia Miszke, Head of
Okay, cool.
HR at PepsiCo, a friend of Diversity Hub, working with us closely for years now. Actually, very active in a was it 2016 well-being conference back then? Time
Absolutely,
flies.
yes. Exactly.
Sylwia,
And
we have
super
a
happy to be back.
and super happy to have you. Tell us, culture fit versus culture add. Culture add. Can you elaborate? Not everyone is clear what you mean by that.
Sure. And I'm super happy to talk about actually this topic because D&I agendas are evolving everywhere in each and every company. So I think good to have a conversation about culture fit and culture add. The culture ad includes all aspects of culture fit. So it's not that much different because, culture is about championing different behaviors, right? That will lead the businesses to success. However, culture ad ask additional questions. These questions are like, what kind of company we want to be, right? Or how do we promote, hire, or make people decision really to add to our current culture, to make it even better. So I think that's super important to have this kind of awareness and to make more deliberate choices on the way. And all these questions, obviously, that we're asking today are good to ask, and adding some additional ones to check on this culture at, especially when we are in the big transformation or the business is hunger for innovation. And I'm sure majority of the businesses have big appetite for innovation. And thinking about top 10 skills introduced like every year by World Economic Forum. These top 10 skills of tomorrow are around innovation, originality, complex problem solving. So having this culture at, meaning building diverse teams, is super important, because then we can actually challenge what is existing currently in the business or in the organization, and make more deliberate choices every day. And I think on top of that, we can somehow check on all the businesses may check on the culture ad through different data touch points. And majority of the organizations have some data touch points, like, for example, the gender split, right? Especially on the managerial positions. So at PepsiCo, we, for example, check this obviously gender split, especially on the leadership positions. Currently, 47% are female, 53 male representation on the leadership positions, but we're as well a very diverse team. Around 37% of our team are people from different countries, right? From 22 countries. So in the background, in the DNA, we have this kind of culture at. And I think majority of the companies as well have kind of engagement surveys, and may check themselves on inclusion index, or may select some of these questions connected to inclusiveness, and how do they build culture at, how do they challenge with the talents that they have inside with culture at. So this is just in short the understanding of the difference and similarities, I would say.
Thank you very much, Sylwia, for establishing the necessary background to our conversation. Let me just say that you're virtually unstoppable when you start, but you already know that.
Okay,
I'm sure.
so please
So if we were
interrupt.
to relate to this culture add dimension, is it like in linguistics, for instance, if you were to use a parallel or an analogy, in linguistics you can have two approaches, like prescriptive and descriptive. Prescriptive, when you try to tell people how to speak, what language to use, how to even edit dictionaries. And descriptive is to rely on is to rely more on what people actually do as opposed to what they should do and describe this reality. So is it something like that, in a sense?
Absolutely, yes, I fully agree with that. And actually, there is a kind of problem as well with the culture fit nowadays, because whenever we talk about this prescriptive, let's say, approach, right? Uh, we have the risk of building homogeneous cultures, right? So this homogeneous culture will not help us to build the business ready for the future. So indeed, something is with this analogy, and I fully agree, Łukasz. That's a good one.
Sylwia, there's a consequence to this analogy, and that is there's a reason why people speak the way they speak, because they want to speak the way they speak. They know they could consult grammar books and dictionaries to speak better, but they prefer to speak the way they do. So what I'm saying is that you can expect resistance once you, because look at the term itself, culture ad. Culture is a very sensitive topic, isn't it? And people often feel, why would we even accept anything added to the culture that we perceive to be our culture? So I'm teasing you a little asking this question, of course, but try and address it.
Yeah, in terms of the resistance, right? Obviously, there will be the resistance in the organization, right? Because with the culture ad, we need to be ready for different ways of thinking, thinking, right? We're working as well with smart people, right? Who will challenge us. The business, the leaders will challenge us by conversations on the team level, on the individual level. So it's important to prepare the organization for this culture ad, because this only then we can actually build this kind of acceptance, or promote even the acceptance, promote the belonging, promote the originality, and we can actually represent better our society, right? And once we start to represent better the society, we can address the needs of our consumers, right? So there is a resistance, but I think there's as well see a lot of benefits of culture act, and it's important as well to be self-aware and build this self-awareness among our teams, among our leaders, among our team members, through different programs like bias training for leaders or mentoring programs. But we need to be ready to challenge ourselves with the smart, diverse teams.
Now that you mention
Stopping,
it,
because then I will be
now that you mention it, I remember one of the bios of one of the speakers at this conference, who happens to be one of the top leaders in the corporate environment. And in her bio, you can read the following phrase: listener in training. So to relate it to what you're saying, I believe for the ad culture to work, you first need to become a much better listener, which is not something that we can take for granted in leaders of organizations. They tend to be great talkers, they tend to impose a lot. Are they great listeners within their organizations? Because what you're saying, Sylwia, is that a lot of know-how comes from group level, team level. So, can you address that one?
Yes, we agree in terms of being a great listener, and obviously through learning, through listening, we are learning, right? We're opening, and we broaden our perspectives on many topics, right? In terms of being a good listener, we need to have these reflections, right? So that's why the businesses are investing in the process or some leadership interventions, how to become more aware and more self-reflective. And that, I think, is key, because once we know about our mental shortcuts, right? Once we may limit our people decisions, let's say, how we make people decisions when we evaluate performance, when we promote someone, hire someone, when we identify SAR, right? These decisions, we're coming with our biases. So it's important to have this self-reflection, to have this, to indeed be able to listen and learn and be open for the other perspectives.
Listening to you, and not to you alone, it feels that bias might be definitely on the podium of the most important words and obstacles to having proper D&I strategy implemented in your company. Tell me, in your analysis and understanding of the topic of this discussion, you refer to organizational cultural maturity curve. Can you comment on this?
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting one, because like decades ago, when the businesses and the C-suite's agenda, the culture was brought as a term, we started to wonder, okay, so what is the culture, right? And we started to define the culture. And back then, we started as well to run the interviews, but as well make people decisions based on questions like, will this candidate match the company values, right? Will this candidate actually will work really well with the team or with a leader? Will his style fit to the team or the leader, right? And now, when D&I agenda is really a part of a lot of businesses' agenda, we started to challenge that. And actually, with this agenda, we started to become more aware about our unconscious biases, but as well about the decisions which we make in terms of building the inclusive environment. Because it turned out that sometimes, or quite often, culture fit is used to reject candidate. So because it's different, right? Because the candidate is different, because the candidate will not fit the team or the ideal picture of the leader. So this became a kind of realization of unconscious bias, right? So nowadays, I think we are much more as the business aware about culture fit versus culture add, consciously or unconsciously, but we are more open to diverse talent, because as well the market is forcing us to be, more open and more actually embracing the diversity.
Sylwia, if we were to look at the topic of our conversation from a somewhat different perspective, is there a moment in the life of an organization where it's especially important to take a closer look at culture add, or is it just random? In other words, are there any powerful moments, moments with a potential?
Sure. So there are powerful moments, like during the onboarding, right? A lot of these we're doing, they are as well powerful moments when we run the meeting. So random, to your point, right? How do we include different perspective? How do we include introverts, extroverts into the conversation, right? Or as I shared before, how do we promote or recognize people? For what do we recognize people, right? So these are the powerful moments that we should actually check ourselves or audit ourselves, how we make these decisions, or how we include others in the conversation. I would say that the most powerful moment is whenever there is, like in our case, we were greenfield like 2 years ago. Now we are much more established organization in Krakow. But during the hiring and onboarding, that is important to use this powerful moment to make sure we build the culture at, right? That we leverage the uniqueness of the talents that are joining the company, not only to go through the let's say, corporate values, but ensure we hear about the people values and what matters to them. But it's relevant not only to the greenfields, right? It's relevant to the new projects, the new transformations. A lot of companies are going through lots of transformative projects, like, I don't know, SAP HANA recently, right? Very common transformative project, right? So what kind of culture we around or any projects to bring this innovation, originality, complex problem solving to the table?
Sylwia, I was going to ask you another question, but instead I have a question from our audience coming from Julia. What are the best D&I practices at PepsiCo? So give us a nice product placement, please.
Well, I think, in terms of PepsiCo globally and here locally, PepsiCo is, as you all know, FMCG company, right? So we are a very diverse company, and the strategy is very strong, and it's from the top but as well bottom up. In Krakow, we are mainly focused on gender diversity, meaning building this gender partnership, and we have lots of initiatives around that to make sure we have this leadership gender partnership and equality in terms of the pay. So globally, even like PepsiCo is very strong in this one. We're checking every year how equally we pay male and females. So now the difference is around 1%. The other point and pillar we are working on is around LGBTQ+, and we have a very strong agenda in here to support minority through running different initiatives, like, for example, what is minority stress, right? And that's relevant to all the minorities, but focusing on LGBTQ+ to understand what might be the minority stress, what are the symptoms. And I love the previous talk of Gosia Wypych, because it's very much related to what she said, right? Having a low mood or depressions, how we manage that, how we actually respond to this. The last piece, equally important, is around cultural diversity, so that we build our global mindset as a PepsiCo. As I shared, 37% of the team members are from 22 countries, right? So how do we learn about one another? How do we actually can resonate better with different cultures, right? With the Serbian cultures, Romanian cultures, Turkish culture. We are really curious about our team members, and we want to make sure everyone feel their true self, because that's our mission. I don't want to do a product placement. I think majority of the companies have this agenda in place and already actually adjusted their D&I strategy to their team members, and that's, I think, the key takeaway is to adjust the D&I strategy to the talents that are in the organization, who wants to be a part of the organization, to really promote this sense of being our true selves at work. I think that's the most important piece.
And I'm sure that everyone interested could also find a report or two describing in detail PepsiCo's priorities along those lines, correct?
Absolutely, Łukasz. And on Expo, there is a D&I report, global reports. You can go there.
Which is exactly where we are now encouraging you to go to. Sylwia Miszke, Head of HR at PepsiCo. Sylwia, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely, likewise. Thank you, team. Thanks, Łukasz.